In 1974, a soldier finally put down his rifle. 29 years after the war he was fighting had already ended. He was not crazy, he was not lost. He was simply the most loyal soldier who ever lived. And that loyalty cost him everything. Lubang Island, Philippines. A small, forgotten island in the South China Sea. For 30 years this jungle was the entire world of one man. While civilizations rose and fell outside, he stayed. He waited. He fought. His name was Hiroo Onoda. Born in 1922, a Japanese Imperial Army intelligence officer, trained in guerrilla warfare, survival, and one absolute principle. A Japanese soldier never surrenders, never, under any circumstances whatsoever. In December 1944, Onoda was sent to Lubang Island with a specific mission: slow down any American invasion. He was given one order, and it was burned into his soul. You are absolutely forbidden to die by your own hand. It may take 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years, but we will come back for you. In February 1945, American forces landed on Lubang. The battle was short. The island was taken. Most Japanese soldiers on the island surrendered or died. But Onoda and a small group of men melted into the jungle. They would not surrender. Their orders were clear. 4 of them went into the jungle together. Onoda and 3 other holdouts, Private Yuichi Akatsu, Corporal Shoichi Shimada, and Private First Class Kinshichi Kozuka. They built shelters. They set traps. They ambushed patrols. They believed completely that the war was ongoing. They survived on bananas, coconuts, and whatever they could steal or hunt. They had no radio, no contact with the outside world, only each other, and their belief, absolute and unshakable, that the Imperial Japanese Army would return for them. On August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's unconditional surrender. The most devastating war in human history was over. Flags came down. Soldiers laid down their weapons. Millions wept with relief. On Lubang Island, nobody heard a word. Japan's government tried everything to reach its soldiers still in the field. Leaflets were dropped from planes. Newspapers were scattered across known positions. Official letters were sent. Many soldiers came out, but Onoda and his men found the leaflets and decided they were Allied propaganda, fakes designed to trick them into surrender. They had been trained to expect psychological warfare, fake surrender documents designed to weaken their resolve. The leaflets looked exactly like what they'd been warned about, so they rejected them, crumpled them, burned them, and went back to their war. Act 2, The Long Wait. Years without end years passed. 1 became 5, 5 became 10. The world outside transformed at breathtaking speed, but inside the jungle of Lubang Island, time moved differently. Onoda's war continued season by season, year by year. He maintained his equipment with obsessive care. His rifle, the same Arisaka Type 99 he'd carried since 1944, was cleaned and oiled constantly. A soldier without a working weapon was a dead soldier. That discipline never wavered, not even for a day. They ambushed Philippine Army patrols. They raided villages for food. From the outside, they looked like bandits, but to themselves, they were soldiers on active duty, fulfilling their mission with honor, fighting for the emperor, waiting for orders to change. The raids were real and deadly. Between 1945 and 1974, Onoda and his companions killed approximately 30 Filipino civilians and soldiers, people who had nothing to do with a war that had ended decades earlier. This is the dark truth that Hiro's stories sometimes obscure. His family sent letters. His brother recorded personal messages that were played from loudspeakers in the jungle. Hiroo, the war is over. Come home. Mother is waiting. He listened to his brother's voice on a phonograph record played at the jungle's edge, and he concluded it was a trick. Back in Japan, his mother waited. His family waited. Japan rebuilt itself from rubble into an economic miracle, while their son fought a ghost war in a jungle nobody was watching anymore. They never stopped trying to reach him. The Philippine government had been trying to find Onoda for years. He was a wanted man, not just a historical curiosity, but an active threat to civilian safety. Military search parties were sent into the jungle repeatedly. All of them failed to catch him. He was impossible to catch. His intelligence training made him a ghost. He knew every trail, every water source, every approach route on Lubang Island. He could hear a patrol coming before they'd covered half the distance to his position. By 1950, the first crack appeared. Private Akatsu began slipping away from the group alone for hours at a time. He was thinking, questioning. The war had been over for 5 years. Could the leaflets really all be lies? In 1950, he separated from the group and surrendered to Philippine forces. Akatsu walked out of the jungle after 6 months alone. He told the Philippine authorities everything about Onoda and the group. He was repatriated to Japan. He ate a proper meal for the first time in 5 years. He slept in a bed. He wept. Onoda watched from a distance. He believed Akatsu had been captured and possibly tortured or brainwashed. He told himself, "We are the true soldiers. We will not break." The group of 4 became 3, and still they fought. While Onoda hid, the Philippines became a fully independent nation. The Cold War began and nearly ended. Rock and roll was invented. A man walked on the moon. Japan rebuilt itself into the world's second-largest economy. None of it reached him. He kept track of the days, made marks, maintained a mental calendar. In his mind, he was a soldier on an extended mission, not a man lost in time. The routine gave him purpose. Waking, patrolling, maintaining equipment, eating, sleeping. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Was he ever lonely? He never admitted it. The training suppressed such thoughts. But some nights, watching the distant lights of fishing boats, the silence must have spoken in ways he refused to answer. He was 22 when he entered that jungle. He would be 52 when he left it. Act 3. One by one. The last soldier standing. In 1954, they were ambushed, or rather, they ambushed a patrol, and it went wrong. Corporal Shimada was shot. He survived the immediate wound but was weakening. In the jungle, without medicine, a wound becomes a death sentence. The group of 3 was about to become 2. Onoda treated Shimada's wound with whatever the jungle offered. Bark, leaves, cloth torn from his own uniform. He had no morphine, no antibiotics, no surgical tools. He had only his hands and his refusal to let his companion die. But the jungle had other plans. Shimada died in June 1954, 9 years into the war that had already ended. Onoda buried him in the jungle. With full military honors he could manage alone. A salute. A folded uniform. The precision of grief given military form. They were now 2. Kozuka was now Onoda's only companion. For the next 18 years, they would be the last 2. They developed the deep, wordless understanding of men who have shared everything: fear, hunger, boredom, purpose. 2 soldiers in their own private war. Outside the jungle, the 1960s happened. The Beatles, the moon landing. Vietnam War protests in America. Japanese bullet trains. Cultural revolution. The world had lapped itself several times. Onoda and Kozuka knew none of it. They were still in 1944. Running low on ammunition became a constant challenge. Onoda improvised. He reloaded spent cartridges. He maintained his rifle parts by cannibalizing broken weapons. He was not just a soldier, he was an engineer, a farmer, a hunter, and a survivor rolled into one relentless human being. Search parties came with loudspeakers, photographs, messages from his family. Each time, Onoda analyzed the evidence and found reasons to doubt. The photos could be staged, the voices could be actors. The Allied psychological operations he'd been warned about seemed to be ongoing. Occasionally, dropped newspapers told him about modern Japan. The 1964 Tokyo Olympics, skyscrapers, exports. These shook him, but he had a ready explanation. Japan was being run by an American puppet government, pretending the war was over while the real Japan still fought. He believed this. He had to. There were conversations in the darkness of the jungle that nobody recorded. Did Kozuka ever say, quietly, once, "What if the war really is over?" Did Onoda ever, in his most private moments, allow the question to form? He never admitted it, but the lines on his face told their own story. October 19th, 1972. 27 years after the war ended. Onoda and Kozuka were stealing rice from a village, an act of war in their minds, survival in everyone else's. Philippine police responded. In the firefight, Kozuka was shot and killed. He was 51 years old. He died believing he was fighting for Japan. Onoda buried Kozuka with the same military honor he'd given Shimada 18 years earlier. He was now completely alone. After 27 years, he was the last Japanese soldier fighting World War II. The entire world by now knew his name. He was a legend and a wanted man. He was 51 years old. He had been in that jungle for 28 years. His hair had gone gray. His face was a map of everything he'd survived. He had no companions left. But he did not surrender. He patrolled. He set traps. He waited. This was who he was. Act 4. The Truth. The day the war finally ended back in Japan, a young man named Norio Suzuki read about Kozuka's death. He was 22, the same age Onoda had been when he entered the jungle. Suzuki was a wanderer, a romantic. He told his friends, "I'm going to find Hiroo Onoda, a panda bear, and the abominable snowman," in that order. In February 1974, Suzuki arrived on Lubang Island alone, not a soldier, not a search party, just one young man with a backpack, walking into the jungle, calling Onoda's name in Japanese. It was either the bravest or most foolish thing anyone had ever done. Onoda had killed strangers in this jungle before. His finger was on the trigger, but something stopped him. The way this boy moved. Not tactical, not military, just walking, calling his name like a friend looking for another friend. Onoda lowered his rifle slightly and waited. They met face to face. Onoda, gray-haired, lean, 52, emerged from the trees. Suzuki stood very still. Neither spoke for a moment. Then Suzuki said in Japanese, "Onoda-san, Japan is looking for you." Onoda stared. He had not spoken to a Japanese person in 27 years. Suzuki told him everything. Japan had rebuilt. The emperor was alive. The war had been over for 29 years. He showed Onoda newspapers, photographs. Onoda listened and told him what he told everyone else. He would only believe it when his commanding officer ordered him to stand down. Suzuki returned to Japan with photographs and Onoda's exact conditions. The Japanese government went looking for Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, Onoda's original commanding officer. Taniguchi was 79 years old. He ran a small bookshop. He agreed immediately. Taniguchi flew to the Philippines in March 1974. He brought his original military uniform from 1944, 30 years old, carefully preserved. He put it on, because Onoda would only accept orders from an officer in proper uniform. Even now, even for this, the protocol had to be exact. March 9th, 1974. In a jungle clearing on Lubang Island, Hiroo Onoda walked toward his commanding officer for the first time in 30 years. Taniguchi was old. The uniform hung differently on his aged body. But it was him. It was really him. Taniguchi read the official order aloud, the order that should have been read in August 1945. All troops to stand down. The mission was over. As the words landed, something in Onoda's face, the warrior's mask he had worn for 30 years, began, for the first time, to move. He wept. He wept for his dead companions, Shimada, Kozuka, who died never knowing the truth. He wept for the civilians he had killed who deserved none of it. He wept for 30 years of his life, given entirely to a war that had been over before his youth had truly ended. He surrendered his rifle, still in perfect working order after 30 years. His ammunition pouches, his dagger, each item placed down with the precision of a man who had maintained them every single day of his jungle life. The Filipino officer who received them stood in silence, visibly moved. He had been in that jungle for 10,152 days. He had fired his last shots in 1972. He had killed 30 people in a war that ended in 1945. He had followed orders more faithfully than any soldier in history, and it had cost him and others everything. ACT 5, The World Outside, 30 years behind. He stepped out of the jungle into 1974. Jeepneys honked, television sets glowed in shop windows, jet planes crossed the sky. He had entered the jungle during World War II and emerged into the world of Elvis, the Beatles, and moon landings. He stood very still and tried to understand. He was flown to Tokyo. Japan had not forgotten him. It had, in fact, made him a legend. His face was everywhere. When he landed at Narita Airport, thousands of people were waiting. He stood at the top of the stairs, blinking in the bright lights, unable to process what he was returning to. Tokyo in 1974 bore no resemblance to the Tokyo he remembered. The city that had been firebombed to ash had rebuilt itself into a gleaming modern capital. He walked its streets with the careful step of a man who had lived in a jungle for 30 years, watching everything, trusting nothing yet. The Japanese government honored him with full military ceremony. He was a hero. The papers called him the embodiment of Bushido, the warrior's code. But Onoda had a harder time with the honor than most people expected, because he knew what he had done and who had died for it in that jungle. He was asked about the Filipino civilians. He did not hide from the question. He acknowledged that people had died, people who were not his enemies, in a war that was not ongoing. He accepted the weight of that. The Philippine government pardoned him for humanitarian reasons, acknowledging his genuine belief. But he never forgot. He moved to Brazil. He bought a cattle ranch in the Mato Grosso state and ran it himself. He later established a nature school for young Japanese people, teaching wilderness survival, self-reliance, discipline. He took the skills that had defined his jungle war and turned them towards something that helped people live. He outlived everything. His war, his era, his jungle. He lived to be 91. He spent his later years teaching, writing, reflecting. In interviews, he was measured and thoughtful. The opposite of the wild soldier the legend portrayed. A real complex human being. Lubang Island today is quiet. Tourists occasionally visit to see the trails he walked for 30 years. The jungle has absorbed the story, as jungles do, growing over the paths, reclaiming the clearings where he camped. Nature forgets. Humans remember. That is the agreement between the two. Act 6. The Reckoning. Loyalty, madness, and humanity. Onoda was not alone in this. Japan had dozens of holdout soldiers across the Pacific. The last, Teruo Nakamura, surrendered the same year as Onoda. These men weren't outliers of madness. They were the logical endpoint of training that demanded total belief and offered no off-ramp. The real question Onoda's story asks is uncomfortable. What is the difference between loyal dedication and catastrophic rigidity? He did exactly what he was trained to do. He followed his orders with perfect fidelity. And yet, 30 people died for it. Where is the line? He wrote his memoir, No Surrender, My 30-Year War. It sold millions. In it, he tried to explain not just what happened, but why. How belief becomes a sealed system, how loyalty becomes a prison, how a man can be absolutely faithful to a reality that has ceased to exist. He put down his rifle. He walked out of the jungle. He was 52 years old and had never lived a day of adult life outside of war. The question the jungle leaves us with: if you discovered that everything you'd believed for 30 years was wrong, what would you do? He followed his orders perfectly. That is both the heroism and the tragedy of this story.